Hey there, friends. So, classes. Oh boy. I've been trying to figure out a way to make this video while keeping up with all the data we've been getting over the last few months, and I know that sounds like I'm complaining, but trust me, I'm not. Thank you, Steven. I think I figured out a way to do this without just brain dumping all over you guys. So first, I'm going to go over the basics of the class system, how it works, augments, archetypes, that sort of thing. And then I'm going to get into the good juicy stuff at the end, like theory crafting and just things that I'm excited for. Timestamps will be in the description, so, convenience, yay. Now let's get into it. In Ashes of Creation, classes are composed of things called archetypes, and by combining these archetypes, or subclasses, however you'd like to call them, a player can create their individual class. Now, these archetypes pull from the same pool of combat roles and create a matrix of sorts of about 64 different class combinations. A primary archetype will dictate a character's primary role within the game. It will be chosen during the creation of the character, and it will be locked. And this is important because Steven said on numerous occasions that he wants decisions in Ashes to matter, and what better way to do that than making the very first decision that you make one of the most important ones. Now, a secondary archetype will augment the abilities of your primary archetype, and it'll probably be chosen at some point during your journey in Ashes. However, this will not be locked. The only comparison I can think of is if you've ever played Arcage, it's probably going to be similar to that system. But instead of just combining classes together and having everything be sort of the same as long as you use those subclasses, in Ashes, your primary role is going to be augmented by your secondary archetype, so it's going to change it up just a little bit. Now I know what you're thinking. I keep using this word augment. What does it even mean, right? Well, it's a good thing I'm a mind reader because I'm about to tell you all about the system and why it has me so excited. So from the information we have so far, there will be aesthetic and non-aesthetic augments. Aesthetic augments will just change the way the ability looks. It's pretty cut and dry. For example, I know that founders will have the ability to apply an augment to their mage's fireball ability to make the flames look more white, just instead of, like normal fire, orange and red. Now there's non-aesthetic augments as well that will change the way the skill or ability feels and how it performs in combat. Additionally, there are 4 schools of augments that a player can choose to progress, and according to Steven and according to the wiki, each class will provide options to all 4 schools. Now at this time, we don't know how each of the classes will approach each school. However, Steven likes to use the fighter mage example whenever he gets the chance. So essentially, the example is a fighter's rush ability could be augmented by a mage's elemental augment and sort of replace, or augment, however you want to say it, the rush ability with a teleportation effect. Now, at its core, it's pretty simple, right? It's not very complicated. But this provides so much depth to the class system and the skill system that I'm genuinely excited to see how some of these play out. Now, Ashes is going to have 8 primary archetypes. And these are probably not new to you if you've played any MMOs in the last 20 years or so. So there's the Bard, which specializes in buffs, minor healing, overall party utility, that sort of thing. There's the Cleric, which specializes in healing, cleansing, and reviving members. There's the Fighter, which specializes in weapon mastery and acts as a bruiser of sorts on the battlefield. There's a Mage, which specializes in mastery over the arcane arts by providing large area of effect spells and crowd control abilities. There's the Ranger, which specializes in the mastery of the bow and tracking its prey with its unrivaled senses. There's the Rogue, which specializes in the art of subtlety and is the master of the shadows. There's the Summoner, which specializes in calling forth minions from the land and beyond to aid it in battle. And finally, there's the Tank, which specializes in controlling the battlefield and kind of just acting as a barrier for its party. Alright, big brain chart time. As you can see, a character's primary and secondary archetypes are pulled from the same list of roles, kind of like I said before. So it's more about the combination in which you decide to experiment with, not just clumping them all together. Now I know this sounds kind of complicated, so I'm going to explain this a little bit more in a minute, but the only other thing I think that's important right now is that the secondary archetype, it's not going to just replace a primary role for either the party or the player. Now, for example, if you're a pure cleric, right, meaning you choose cleric as your primary archetype and cleric as your secondary archetype, you're probably going to be the best healing class in the game, right? You are doubling down on that role. Now, if you chose cleric for your primary archetype and fighter as your secondary, Now, some of that healing utility is going to be traded for characteristics of the fighter, right? It's common sense, kind of like a give and trade system. You're probably going to be a little bit more physically offensive at that point. If you chose fighter as your primary and cleric as your secondary, then you're going to have a little bit of healing utility, but you're not just going to be able to replace a cleric as a primary role. You might get a few self buffs or a few self heals for that class, but you're not just going to be able to run in with a massive sword or shield or something like that, right? In the middle of that rush, just spamming AoE heals left and right. You're probably not going to be able to do that. Now, there are other archetypes in the game, such as racials, religious, and organizational archetypes. For organizational, kind of think like Thieves Guild. But this is the class system in a nutshell. You got your primary archetype, you got your secondary archetype, and you have your augment system. And a combination of those three, it really makes this truly unique class experience that I personally have never experienced in an MMO. Okay, so with all that aside, now let's get into some of the good stuff. As you look at this chart, what sticks out to you? Well, I'll tell you one thing. There are a few things that rustle my absolute jimmies about this chart, and it just seems like a great way for me to play out some of my favorite class fantasies. For example, Summoner just speaks to me in pretty much every game. I love the idea of being able to call forth minions, beasts, demons, etc., whatever have you, and have the ability to unleash them as I see fit. This probably stems from my obsession with a certain Japanese franchise, but I digress. So a little background. Steven has already confirmed that a summoner can control up to 3 summons, and those summons can fill either a tank, healer, or a DPS role. Additionally, secondary summoner archetypes have the ability to summon weapons that a character can temporarily use in battle. So let's look at some of these. What if you chose a ranger for your primary and a summoner as a secondary archetype? Imagine being able to summon an enchanted bow that doubles your ability to crit or applies some sort of elemental augment to your shots, whether that's damage or some other effect. Now take that even further to PvP. What if your shots have the ability to CC like root or slow, but also it calls forth temporary minions that could provide further utility? Now let's look at the other side of that coin. Summoner as a primary and ranger as a secondary. The obvious ability is to summon beasts, right? Yeah. But what if you had to tame them first? Or take that further, what if you had to defeat them first in battle? What if some of the largest battles in Vera are nothing more than golden opportunities for some of the most elite beast hunters in the land? That would be cool. I could talk about summoners for a lot longer than I care to admit, so at this point I'm going to take a step away from them and look to something else. Like, how about bards? Now specifically the bard rogue type seems dope. From what we know so far, bards are sort of this jack of all trades kind of character. They're going to have a little bit of utility, a little bit of damage, and a little bit of like heals and buffs and whatnot through their songs. Couple that with the sneakiness of a rogue, and that makes for some pretty interesting skill combinations. For example, having a bard as your primary and a rogue as your secondary could augment one of your party's buffs to stealth instead of providing said buff. Now, I can already hear it, so before you throw into the comments that what are you thinking, stealth is already broken, get out of here with that nonsense.
Know your place, trash.
Hear me out. We don't know what stealth will do yet. Well, we know the basic idea of what stealth is, that's common sense. But we don't know to what extent it's going to be. Are we going to be completely invisible? Because as far as I know, we're not going to be. So what if it's just more like a strategy? Like if anybody in your party moves, it breaks the stealth, right? So you're all just sitting there pretty, and I accidentally hit W or S, and now everybody is just sitting out there in the open, doing nothing. That doesn't sound very fun, right? Because that's the point. It's not supposed to be overpowered. It's just to provide a platform for some interesting ambush strategy, maybe during sieges or just open world PvP. Now imagine the flip side of that coin. A rogue augmentation that provides buffs to sense other rogues in stealth much easier. Not complaining now, are you? You hypocrite.
Got him.
There are so many possibilities with a class like the Bard because it depends on how they augment their songs. It depends on how the augmentations affect their songs, which seems to be the most important part of their kit. Overall, Bards are another one I'm just excited for, and I can't wait to try them out. Okay, one more. How about the Fighter? A staple of any combat system, right? And it's usually pretty easy to pick up. Well, in Ashes, fighters will specialize in closing the gap between it and its enemies, and You guessed it, using various weapons to debilitate and take down his foes. Now picture this. You see a poor lonely mage just minding its business, picking some flowers, playing with the elements, just doing what mages do. You clench your spear, let out a horrifying roar and rush to its side, piercing its cloth robes and applying a slow. Well, mages are sneaky, and he teleports away thinking he's made his escape. Well, lucky for you, you have a bow, and you let out a piercing arrow that further slows the mage. This provides you the ability to rush back in, set traps around your prey. The mage, weak and desperate, makes a last stand but to no avail. You take one last look at the helpless mage as you steal his kill, and you jump on his mangled corpse for sport. Alright, well, other than me acting like an absolute idiot, that was kind of fun. That class is called a Hunter. It's a fighter primary, ranger secondary, and it seems like it'd actually be pretty effective in PvP. Now, I have no idea if they can actually set traps, but that'd be pretty dope if they could. Well, friends, that's it. This has been a blast, honestly. I love making these videos. I like theory crafting. I like talking about stuff. I eventually will be doing more of these videos on each archetype as we get more information about them. So more to come. Look out for those. If you liked this video, it made you laugh, or you didn't like it, let me know in the comments. I love hearing feedback. I love hearing what you guys have to say. As always, thanks for watching, stay safe, and I'll see you in the next one.